Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. You guys have been wrestling with some pretty huge questions about the nature of reality, especially the connection between spirit and matter, all based on the Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science.
Yes, some really fundamental questions.
Definitely. So today we're going to try to unpack this wild idea from Chapter 2, that a higher intelligence can actually control a lower one.
It's a real head-scratcher. It makes you completely rethink how we normally look at intelligence, control, and how it affects us each day.
For sure. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's rewind a bit to Chapter 1.
Sounds good.
Remember how the author starts off by asking what really makes living spirit different from just dead matter? You'd naturally think, oh, it's all about movement, right?
Great.
But then they throw in this curveball,
Oh, yeah.
saying even something seemingly dead like a lump of steel is actually buzzing with activity at the atomic level.
It's a great point. They're highlighting that even at the most basic level, there's this constant energy, this motion happening. So spirit and matter might not be as black and white as we first thought.
Okay, so then we get to Chapter 2, and things get even wilder. Now, the author brings up this idea of degrees of livingness. So it's not just alive versus dead anymore. It's like this whole spectrum of intelligence and awareness.
Exactly. And that's how they introduce this idea of control. Think about it. A plant's alive, but it doesn't have the same awareness or control over what's happening around it as, say, a dog.
Right.
And humans, with our complex thinking and self-awareness, well, we're at the top.
So the author's basically saying the smarter, the more aware something is, the more control it has over its own little world.
You got it. And to explain it, they use this analogy of an electrician working with electricity. If they don't understand how electricity works, zap, they're in for a shock. But if they get it, they can harness that power to do amazing things.
I love that analogy. Like all those times I've tried to force things to go my way instead of just going with the flow, it never really works out, does it?
Nope. And the author really drives that point home. It's not about forcing our will on the universe. It's about understanding how things work, both the physical and the mental laws, and aligning ourselves with them. The more self-aware we are, the more we can shape what we experience and the world around us.
So this higher intelligence controlling a lower one isn't about, like, bending spoons with our minds.
No, not exactly. It's deeper than that. It's about realizing that intelligence isn't just stuck in our brains. The author actually suggests there's a kind of intelligence woven into the fabric of the universe itself. It's present in every single atom. They even call it atomic intelligence.
Okay, whoa, now we're getting into the really good stuff. Atomic intelligence. Sounds like every little particle has a mind of its own.
It's a pretty wild concept, right? And they're saying that as we grow and become more aware, we can tap into this universal intelligence and, like, steer it with our thoughts.
So it's like we're upgrading our operating system, becoming power users of the universe.
That's a great way to put it. The more we crack the code of the universe, the more we can change the program of our lives. But hold on, it's not about controlling everything around us like puppets.
Right.
It's about getting in sync, getting in the flow of things.
Makes sense. So how does this atomic intelligence thing actually play out in our lives? I remember the author mentioned something called mental treatment in Chapter 2.
Yeah, mental treatment. That's where things get really interesting, and we start to see how these ideas work in the real world. And it's not about magic or wishing things were different. It's about understanding how spirit, even at the tiniest level, the atom, responds to a higher intelligence.
Okay, hold on. So if we tap into this atomic intelligence, could we actually, like, heal ourselves or even make things happen in our lives? This is where I get a bit skeptical.
It's understandable to be skeptical, and the author gets that. They're not saying we can defy the looks of nature, but rather work with them.
All right, so how do we actually do that? What are the steps for mental treatment?
Well, they don't give a step-by-step guide in these early chapters, probably because there's not just one way to do it. It's more about understanding the ideas and then applying them in a way that works for you.
So less of a strict recipe and more like learning the techniques and adapting them.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our thoughts aren't just passive things happening inside us. They're active forces shaping our reality.
That's pretty powerful. So if we want to change our reality, we've got to change how we think first.
That's a big part of it, definitely. But there's also this whole thing about understanding the link between thought and form.
Ah, right. The author talked about that. Form being the physical shape of something and being its essence, its true nature. But how is that connected to this mental treatment?
It's like this. If we're too focused on the outer form, we miss the deeper intelligence that's working behind the scenes. And When we're talking about healing, a lot of times illness happens because there's a disconnect between our thoughts and our physical being.
So if we can get our thoughts aligned with feeling healthy, feeling whole, we can actually influence our healing.
Exactly. And that's where atomic intelligence comes back in. The author is suggesting that each cell in our body has its own kind of intelligence. It responds to what we think and believe.
So it's like we're sending a message to our cells, like a blueprint for health, and they actually listen.
You got it. It's realizing that our thoughts aren't just happening in our heads, they're actually interacting with the world, right down to the cells in our body.
Wow. Okay, there's so much to unpack here.
Mhm.
This whole atomic intelligence thing sounds like the key to understanding how our thoughts actually shape what's real.
It definitely is a core concept.
All right, so this atomic intelligence thing is pretty wild. But how does it actually work in like real life? Can we get into some examples?
Sure. So in chapter 2, the author uses a bunch of different examples to show how this whole higher intelligence controlling a lower one plays out. One that really jumps out is the comparison between fish and humans.
Oh yeah, I remember that. So one where like tons of fish are born, but only a tiny amount make it like it's all down to luck and where they end up.
Exactly. They're pretty much at the mercy of whatever's happening around them, predators, you name it. But as we move up the ladder, things change. We get more control. Humans, with all our smarts and self-awareness, we can really influence our own survival.
So it's not just a game of chance for us anymore. We actually have a say in how things turn out.
Exactly. We can make choices, learn from our mistakes, and adapt to new stuff way better than a fish ever could. Doesn't mean life is always fair or easy, but the author's saying we have more power than we think.
Okay, but what about those times when it feels like life's just throwing punches left and right? How does this atomic intelligence help us deal with the unexpected?
That's where mental treatment comes in. And it's not about pretending everything's fine or ignoring the hard stuff. It's about recognizing the power we have to get through those tough times by, like getting our thoughts and beliefs in line with what we want to happen.
So not ignoring problems, but kind of shifting our mindset, focusing on solutions and feeling more in control.
Exactly. It's about truly believing in our ability to overcome obstacles and make good things happen, even when it's tough.
Okay, that makes sense. But can we circle back to that whole form versus being thing for a second? How does knowing that difference help us actually use this mental treatment stuff?
Okay, good question. Imagine you're dealing with, let's say, a health issue. If you're only thinking about the form of the illness, the symptoms, what the doctor says, well, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, powerless.
Yeah, I think we've all been there. It's hard not to get caught up in the fear and anxiety when you're facing a health problem.
Absolutely. But if you shift your focus to the being of health, to that natural intelligence and healing power within your body, you can tap into something way stronger.
So instead of fixating on what's wrong, we're focusing on that potential for being whole, being healthy. That's already inside us.
Exactly. It's about getting our thoughts and beliefs in sync with that healthy state of being, with the intelligence of our own bodies.
It's like we're sending a signal to ourselves saying, hey, this is the plan. This is where we're going. Let's get healthy and strong.
That's a great way to think about it. It's about using the power of our thoughts to actually influence matter, to steer that healing process.
This is starting to click. So it's bigger than just thinking positive. It's about tapping into that deeper intelligence inside us and in the universe and aligning our thoughts with it.
Absolutely. And the more self-aware we become, the more we understand how this mental treatment works, the better we get at using it in all parts of our lives.
So does that mean we could use this for other stuff too, like to improve our relationships or even to reach our career goals?
You bet. The principles are the same no matter what you're facing. It's all about recognizing the power of thought to shape reality and making sure our thoughts and beliefs match up with what we want to achieve.
So if I'm stuck in like a negative lip in a relationship, I could use mental treatment to change my perspective and start attracting more positive things.
Exactly. Instead of dwelling on the bad stuff, focus on the good qualities you want, both in yourself and your partner.
Like I'm making a new plan for the relationship based on all this stuff we've been talking about.
Perfect analogy. And that same idea works for career stuff, really any area where you're looking for change.
Man, this is really empowering. It feels like we've got a whole new toolkit to build the life we want.
And that's the message the author is driving home. We're not just stuck with what life throws at us. We're active participants in creating our own reality.
I love that. But I imagine this takes some serious practice and discipline to actually master.
For sure. The author's super clear about how important it is to be consistent and to stick with it. This isn't a quick fix, it's a journey, learning about ourselves and growing along the way.
So it's about learning a whole new way to think and be in the world.
Exactly. And as we get better at matching up our thoughts or beliefs with what we truly want, we start seeing real lasting change in our lives.
This is all just so fascinating. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of what's possible with this mental treatment
We'll
stuff.
have. And as we wrap up this part, I want to encourage everyone listening to think about how these ideas might fit into your own life. What area are you feeling stuck in? What change are you hoping for?
And how can you start using these mental treatment principles to switch up your thinking and start making that change happen?
Remember, the power to change things is inside each of us. It's about tapping into that atomic intelligence and aligning our thoughts and beliefs with the life we want to live.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive, everybody.
Mhm.
I gotta say, my head's still spinning after that last part. This whole idea of mental treatment, it's just so powerful, so much potential.
Yeah, it really makes you rethink how we see reality, right? It's not about just accepting what happens anymore. It's about being a part of shaping it, creating it.
Absolutely. But it can also be a little like, whoa, where do we even start? What are some things we can actually do to use this stuff in our everyday lives?
Right. Well, remember, the author's big on this point that mental treatment isn't some rigid set of rules or formulas. It's more about understanding the big ideas and then figuring out how to make them work for you.
So it's more like an art than a science.
You could say that. And like with any art form, it takes practice, trying things out to see what clicks for you. But the author does give us some hints in chapter 2, especially when they're talking about how thoughts and form are connected.
Right. They said the defining quality of spirit is thought, and the defining quality of matter is form.
Exactly. And one of the big takeaways there is if we want to change how something looks, how it exists in the physical world, we got to start by changing how we think about it.
So like if I'm struggling with a health problem, instead of focusing on all the bad symptoms, I should try to direct my thoughts toward feeling healthy, feeling good.
Exactly. It's about shifting that mental energy away from the problem and aiming it at the solution. They use this analogy of a gardener who wants to grow beautiful flowers.
A gardener. Okay, how does that fit in?
Well, think about it. The gardener doesn't just focus on yanking out weeds. They also make sure the soil is good, they plant the seeds, they nurture the flowers they want. It's the same with mental treatment. We have to nourish the thoughts, the beliefs that support what we want to see happen.
So it's not just about getting rid of the bad thoughts. It's about actively growing the good ones.
You got it. And the more we practice doing that, the stronger those positive thought patterns get, and the weaker those negative ones become.
Makes sense. But what about those times when things are just really rough, like a really tough relationship or maybe a financial setback? It's hard to stay positive when you feel so overwhelmed.
Totally, and the author gets that. There will be times when we feel discouraged, like we can't make a difference. But they're big on this idea of keeping at it, reminding ourselves about these principles we're learning.
So it's about holding on to that belief in the power of thought, even when stuff gets hard.
Exactly. And one thing they suggest is using affirmations, basically, choosing to focus on positive statements that line up with what we want to see happen.
So instead of saying, ugh, I'm so stressed about money, I might say, I'm open to receiving abundance and prosperity.
Right. By repeating those affirmations, we're basically retraining our subconscious mind to be in sync with our goals.
That's wild. It's like planting seeds of positive change in our minds.
And the more we water those seeds with consistent effort, with belief, the more likely they are to actually grow and blossom into something real.
So it's not just about thinking happy thoughts, it's about actually doing things, taking action that match those thoughts.
Exactly. It's all about creating that harmony, that flow between our inner world, our thoughts and beliefs, and our outer world, what we actually do.
That makes sense. It's not enough to just sit around wishing for things to change. We got to be active participants in making that change happen.
You got it. And remember, it's a process, a journey. There will be ups and downs, times when we doubt, and times when things are super clear. What's important is to stick with it. Trust that we're on the right track.
So patience and being kind to ourselves, those are key parts of all this.
For sure. It's about celebrating our wins, no matter how small, and trusting that we have the power to create the life we want.
This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening. It feels like I have this whole new understanding of how my thoughts shape everything around me.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, the journey of learning about ourselves and growing, it never really ends. The more we understand about how things really work, the more power we have to live lives that are full and meaningful.
Thank you all so much for joining us on the Deep Dive. We hope this has got you thinking about this idea of mental treatment and how you can use it in your own lives. And remember, just like the author of the Edinburgh Lecture says, the power to create change is in each of us. So keep exploring, keep growing, and keep believing in all the possibilities that are out there.